Hello there. I hope you're well. My name is Jerome, and this is Spirituality 2, the I Ching series, Chapter 6. In this journey we've taken through the I Ching, we've discussed the beginning of all things, the combination of the creative and the receptive, difficulty at the beginning wherein life has to struggle to attain form. Then, the young fool, youthful folly, where you now have form, but you're pure ego, you're not connected with God. You need to find a teacher, you need to find some way to tame, if you will, the young fool, the ego, through education, through learning respect, if you will. Finding a teacher, and then paying attention. And finally, moving forward steadily, mastering each point one by one. That's how the young fool basically becomes chapter 5, which is waiting. So once you've put the ego, if you will, into its proper place, then you must wait. And in that process, you must not lose faith. You must fortify the body with food and drink, be joyous and of good cheer. And thus, you're ready when fate comes. If you will, you can put fate on a firm footing just by the way you approach it and allow it. And oftentimes, the waiting is very difficult because you can lose faith, you can lose hope, you can feel like you're losing the battle, losing the war. You know, how do you maintain, if you will, faith that there's a process here bigger than you, and not allow the ego, if you will, the small child, to come back to the surface and go, well, this is uncomfortable, this is bad, this is not the way I wanted it. Rah, 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 rah. Boom, right back to the young fool. I want it, and I'll throw a fit if I can't get it. I'll manipulate. I'll do anything I have to get it the way I want it. I don't care what anybody else thinks. And then they run into issues with that. And that leads us perfectly, really, into our next chapter, which is called conflict. The image of it is above we have the creative, which moves upward, heaven, and below we have the abysmal, water, which flows downward. So above we have heaven, below we have water. Each of them move in opposite directions. Heaven goes up into the infinity, water sinks down into the abyss. So they don't collide, and therefore there is a conflict. They aren't meeting in the middle. The upper triagram, whose image is heaven, has an upward movement. The lower, water, in accordance with its nature, tends downward. Thus, the two halves move away from each other, giving rise to the idea of conflict. The attribute of the creative is strength. That of the abysmal is danger, guile. Where cunning has force before it, there is conflict. Think about what it just said. Strength and guile. Cunning. Or cunning. You could say that the ego is cunning. Okay. When you give strength to the ego. Okay, do you see the message here? And this fits in perfectly with the last video I did. When you give strength to the ego, it thinks of cunning, it thinks of manipulation, it thinks like a small child, and therefore you have conflict. It says it right there in the I Ching. A third indication of conflict is in terms of character, presented by the combination of deep cunning within and fixed determination outwardly. Think about that. Deep cunning within, fixed determination outwardly. That means that the ego, which is the deep cunning part, has fixed itself and created determination. Just like I was just literally just saying, basically the ego, once it does take over, even if what we're doing is disgusting, it feels good somehow. The ego strokes itself. It's a small child, you know. It can be placated, and that's where the cunning comes in, you know, where the ego gets its little scritch in that one spot, you know. Fixed determination within and cunning. You know, cunning within, fixed determination outwardly is a symbol, if you will, of pure egotism. The judgment. Conflict. You are sincere and are being obstructed. Think of that as a life situation. You are sincere and are being obstructed. You believe that this is purple. This is purple. Right? Somebody else says, no, that's fuchsia. And you go, no, it's purple. You are sincere in that, yeah, it's purple. And they're like, no, it's not, it's fuchsia. So they're obstructing the fact that that's purple in your mind. A cautious halt halfway brings good fortune in this situation. Going through to the end will bring misfortune. What does that say? That's saying caution, Will Rogers, conflict. The ego is taking control. Conflict. Ego equals conflict. Stop. Cautious halt halfway. Stop. Okay. Fuchsia is okay. Yeah. What does it really matter what color this cup is? Doesn't. What's really important, not the color of this cup. What's really important in that situation is my interpretation of the color of the cup and my feelings, my ego. If I stop, let it go, forgive, say, yeah, okay, fuchsia, let it go. Then the cause of conflict is removed in advance. I have gotten on top of it, if you will. That's why a cautious halt halfway brings good fortune. And carrying it through to the end and going, you know what? No, that's purple, man. No, it's fuchsia. You know what? You don't have any idea what you're saying. Fuck you. Put my cup over here. That way you don't have to look at it. That is carrying it through to the end. Now there's enmity between me and this other individual over the color of a cup. And it happens just like that. And many times it'll happen just like that in your own mind, but you won't externalize it because you're frightened. But you have the same damage. You have the same damage in the end, whether it's inside or whether you externalize it. Cautious halt halfway means forgiving, forgetting, letting go. Before it has even started, learning to perceive, hey, I see there's something coming here. Let's stop. That's the advice of this age. It furthers one to see the great man. It does not further one to cross the great water. And I'm interpreting these lines and then reading the text afterwards. But I have my own interpretation, and based upon having read each one of these chapters hundreds of times each. I literally, like yesterday when I got overwhelmed, had to just look up and pull it out of my brain, and that stopped the emotional overload at that moment. So that's helpful. So it furthers one to see the great man. It means you need to disconnect yourself from it and have a third party look, whoever that third party is. It must be a great person. It must be somebody who already is detached from their egos, who isn't connected by their ego to some factionalism or other thing that makes it false. The great man. And it does not further one to cross the great water, means that in times like this, you know, the purple cup times, you don't want to, in the middle of that, say, okay, now let's build this wall, or let's do something dangerous. No. That's what crossing the great water is. It's taking on a momentous, dangerous task. Not a time for that. If you're in conflict, you need to focus on getting out of the conflict. And that's what this is all about. Is teaching you to focus and get out of the conflict. Remove your ego from the situation. The text reads, conflicts develops when one feels himself to be in the right and runs into opposition. Given my last video and where my brain was, and then I opened the I Ching, conflict. The message here is once again so profound, it's amazing. This is exactly what I'm saying. Someone feels themselves to be in the right and runs into opposition. This is a purple cup. No, it isn't. It's fuchsia. It's purple. No, it isn't. It's fuchsia. If one is not convinced of being in the right, opposition leads to craftiness or high-handed encroachment, but not to open conflict. For instance, the person who says, no, it's fuchsia, says, you know what, I don't even care, and walks away before the conflict develops, then it may not lead to open conflict, but there still is that residual energy left over, that negative energy. And that can lead to high-handed encroachment. High-handed encroachment could be considered going down the road and the person sees a obvious purple truck and goes, hey, look, a fuchsia truck, just to aggravate this person, who's the purple person, okay? That's a high-handed encroachment. It's an attack, but it's just not an attack. It's just an observation, right? That's the ego. If a man is entangled in a conflict, his only salvation lies in being so clear-headed and inwardly strong that he is always ready to come to terms by meeting the opponent halfway. Okay, fuchsia, I could see fuchsia, yeah. And that will even encourage, okay. And they'll be encouraged in their mind. You'll feel okay in your mind. You'll avoid the conflict, and in the end, that's salvation. It lies in being clear-headed, inwardly strong, and always ready to come to terms by meeting the opponent halfway. To carry on a conflict to the bitter end has evil effects, even when one is in the right. Use cellular data. I hope I didn't just jack this whole thing up. No. To carry on a conflict to the bitter end has evil effects, even if one is in the right. Yeah. Because when you think about it, the conflict is carried on because you meet the person on their grounds at their end of the spectrum instead of halfway, and so you become embroiled in what they are. You have to match them blow for blow, if you will, in order to do the conflict on their terms. and carry it out to the bitter end, to carry it out to the bitter end. Even if you're right, is not a successful matter. It has evil effects, even when one is in the right, because the enmity is then perpetuated. That's that negative energy I was talking about. It is important to see a great man, that is, an impartial man, not egotistic, whose authority is great enough to terminate the conflict and assure a just decision. In times of strife, crossing the great water is to be avoided. That is, dangerous enterprises are not to be begun, because in order to be successful, they require concerted unity of forces. Conflict within weakens the power to conquer danger without. So if you continue to fall into it, if you continue to basically allow your ego to control the situation and carry this conflict out because you know you're right, okay? Even if you've been offended, even if you've been hurt or raped or whatever the case may be, to carry out the conflict with that individual, you have to get onto their level. Your ego comes forward and takes over because your inner true self would never do that. The voice of God within you will speak forth and go, well, you know, let's call it Furple or Fuchsia. I don't know what to call it. It doesn't really matter, does it? No, it doesn't really matter. You can call it whatever you want, you know. Or if it does get into an argument and Dad walks in and goes, what are you guys fighting about? Well, he says it's purple and I say it's fuchsia. Well, it's obviously, I don't know, it could be considered either way. Depends on how you look at it. So you guys need to just like break this up. I don't want to hear any more of this. That's the great man. Okay. He didn't say, no, it's clearly purple, or no, it's clearly fuchsia. He said, depends on how you look at it. And you guys look at it differently. No big deal. Now move on. I am imposing forgiveness because I have the authority to do so. The image of this is heaven and water go their opposite ways, just like I said, they're moving apart. This is the image of conflict. Thus, in all his transactions, the superior man carefully considers the beginning. In all his transactions, the superior man carefully considers the beginning. And even though this is a short chapter, it's taken a minute to get through it because this is important material, I think. It's therapeutic for me personally. The image indicates that the causes of conflict are latent in the two opposing tendencies of the trigrams, up and down. Once these opposing tendencies appear, conflict is inevitable. To avoid it, therefore, everything must be taken carefully into consideration in the very beginning. If rights and duties are exactly defined, or if in a group the spiritual trends of the individuals harmonize, the cause of conflict is removed in advance. That is chapter 6 of the I Ching, or Book of Changes, Wilhelm translation. And conflict is really a perfect one, because now that you're out of the folly of youth, then you're gonna engage into this conflict. How are you gonna live your life? How are you gonna function as an adult? Who is in charge? That's important. When we figure that out, and it will take time, and it's a process. And I think the rest of these chapters are kind of an educational, the taming power of the small. fellowship with men, possession in great measure, modesty. All these lessons are at the right time and in the right order, in the right place. And part of a spiritual evolution, I guess you could say. And if you lasted for 20 minutes, then welcome. My name is Jerome, and this is Spirituality 2. Have a good morning.